everything that I can to make sure that the budget that is finally passed here in the Senate is a fair budget, is a responsible budget, is a just budget. With that, I would yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from New York.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I want to just give kudos and accolades to my friend and colleague and fellow Madisonian, Madison High School in Brooklyn, New York, that is, Bernie Sanders. I have rarely met, not just here in the Senate, but in public life, people who display the passion and the effectiveness combined that Bernie does. And sometimes it's a lonely world for him, in a certain sense, because he feels these issues so strongly. He is so outstanding at articulating them in every way, and he wonders why the world doesn't change a little more. Well, Bernie, in terms of this world, which changes slowly, unfortunately, we would agree with that, you've done a great deal of good for people who need help, and I'm just glad you're here, and I'm glad you're my friend. Thank you. Anyway, Madam President, I rise today in support of the legislation authored by my good friend from New Jersey, Senator Menendez. As you know, the Democrats here on our side of the aisle are focusing on this legislation this week and next, but Senator Menendez has been championing this legislation for quite a while, and he was prescient to focus on this idea, and I'm glad we'll have a vote on it, and I hope the vote will pass. I've heard a few of our Republican colleagues now have said they'd consider voting for it. Nothing would be better in terms of showing some bipartisanness and giving us some hope that we can come to a fair agreement on the budget than to pass this legislation. Now, in the last election, voters who gave those of us who have the privilege of serving in this chamber two distinct mandates. They told us to do two things at once. First, perhaps foremost, make the economy grow, create good-paying jobs, make sure that that American dream burns brightly, the dream that says to the average middle-class family, the odds are pretty good that you'll be doing better 10 years from now than you're doing today, and the odds are very good that your kids will do better than you. That dream, which has burnt so brightly in this country for hundreds of years, the candle began to flicker a little bit in this decade because median income went down, even before the recession, which meant that even if you had a job, and we know that millions are out of work despite the fact that they look, and I think of all the people who I've met who are struggling because they don't have jobs, but even people who do have work, they have a difficult time when they sit down at that dinner table Friday night after dinner figuring out how they're going to pay the bills. The costs and needs keep going up, and even when you have a job, the income doesn't seem to keep up. So that is one obligation the voters sent to us, and it's a very justified one. But second, they said in no uncertain terms, rein in the out-of-control federal deficit. Rein it in. And they're right. Because in a certain sense, Madam President, and I've said this before, but I think it's worth repeating, the symbolic nature of the debt is as follows. We, the U.S. government, are a blindfolded man, and we're walking towards the cliff. And once we fall off that cliff, there's no getting back up. Now, the debate is whether we're 20 feet from that cliff or 200 yards from that cliff. But we know sooner or later, if we keep walking straight, we're going to fall off. So that means try to rein in this federal, out-of-control federal deficit. It would be hard enough to accomplish one of these goals. To try to do both at once is a Herculean task. And it's why we're having such divisions here, and it's why everyone's grappling. And I think everyone's trying to do the right thing, regardless of their ideology. But there are strong feelings. So, when we can come to issues that seem to have an easy common ground, because things are so difficult, we ought to jump at them. And that's what the Menendez Amendment is. It's a choice that's not a tough one, not by a mile, because it is obvious that at this time, when there are so many needs, to continue to give the oil companies the kinds of tax break we do make no sense. Getting rid of these corporate subsidies to big oil is a no-brainer. Decades ago, these were passed. Oil was $17 a barrel, and maybe it made sense in those days to give companies an incentive to explore, to produce. One of the subsidies that the Menendez legislation repeals, the oil depletion allowance, dates back to 1913. That's the same year a man named William Burton patented a new oil extraction process called thermal cracking. Well, Madam President, big oil no longer cracks petroleum using Mr. Burton's method. It's an outdated process, decidedly. But the outdated tax subsidy still remains on the books, amazingly enough. With oil hovering at $100 a barrel, big oil reaping record profits, it defies logic for this government to spend billions of dollars, for these taxpayers to give dollars out of their pocket every year when they're struggling to tax giveaways to big oil, which is making record profits. Believe me, the free market gives the oil companies enough of an incentive to produce. When oil is $100 a barrel, they don't need an extra subsidy from the federal government to produce. They're going to produce every bit of oil they can. They make huge profits. So they don't need a financial nudge from Washington. And at the same time, middle-class Americans get hit with a double whammy. They're paying $70 or more to fill up their gas tank, and then some of their hard-earned tax dollars are being used to line big oil's pockets. In my home state of New York, the price of gas is up 35% on average compared to this time last year. Economists estimate the typical family will pay more than almost $1,000 more on gas this year than last. Families across the country are still struggling to make ends meet as the economy slowly recovers. They can't afford to get gouged at the pump. With billions of dollars worth of tax subsidies and gas prices at near record highs, it's no wonder that the top 5 oil companies just announced mind-boggling profits. These companies are not only among the most profitable businesses in the U.S., they're among the most profitable in the whole world. In the first quarter of this year alone, the Big Five brought in $36 billion in profit. In the past decade, they took home nearly $1 trillion, not $1 billion, $1 trillion in profit. Now, there's nothing wrong with these profits in and of themselves. In America, we celebrate success, want the private sector to thrive. But at a time when the government is looking to tighten its belt, and we're grappling with painful cuts because we have the dual goal of growing the middle class but also reducing the deficit, it boggles the mind that we continue to subsidize such a lavishly profitable industry. There are priorities. I said this to the oil company executives today when they testified before the Finance Committee, and I want to salute Chairman Baucus for holding such outstanding hearings. There are priorities. How many Americans would say, if we had to choose, that we should give oil companies an extra subsidy rather than help kids who deserve to go to college pay for college? That's what many of my colleagues are recommending. That's what the House budget recommended. How many of my colleagues would say that we ought to cut cancer research but still continue to give the oil companies subsidies we do? Again, the Ryan budget does that. Now, I understand they would say we have to cut spending. We do. But we also have to cut out wasteful giveaways like tax breaks to big oil. And I do that before I cut aid to college students who are struggling to pay for college, which is more and more expensive. Before I cut cancer research, which has saved millions of lives, including people we know and love. I would do that before I cut money for veterans or cut money to keep our homeland secure. But the budget that Mr. Ryan has proposed, and many of the budgets that I've seen come from colleagues on the other side of the aisle, choose these subsidies to big oil over money to help kids pay for college, over cancer research, over helping our veterans, over keeping our homeland secure. Hardly any American would agree with that. Hardly any American, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, northeast, south, or west. So just try to wrap your head around it. Big oil is recording record profit, gas prices are near an all-time high, and we, the American taxpayer, are subsidizing the oil industry to the tune of $4 billion a year. You don't need the imagination of Lewis Carroll to come up with a more ridiculous scenario. That's why I strongly support and am proud to co-sponsor Senator Menendez's Close Big Oil Tax Loopholes Act. This legislation will put an end to taxpayer handouts to the 5 largest integrated oil companies, use the $21 billion savings to reduce the deficit. This $21 billion is an excellent down payment on our effort to get the nation's fiscal house in order. The bill repeals a host of Byzantine tax provisions that only a lobbyist could love, such as the deduction for tertiary injectants and the deduction for intangible extraction costs. Small and medium-sized oil firms are exempt. The legislation only deals with the big 5, Shell, ExxonMobil, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, and BP. Now, I've heard pundits from the hard right parrot big oil's talking point that repealing these giveaways would increase gas prices for consumers. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. Independent analyses have repeatedly found that ending these absurd subsidies would not impact the price of gas. And in what was perhaps an inadvertent moment of candor at this morning's Senate Finance Committee hearing, ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson said, and I quote, "Gasoline prices are a function of crude oil prices, which are set in the marketplace by global supply and demand, not by companies such as ours," unquote. Now, that doesn't seem like an objectionable comment. It's true. But even when he made that comment, Mr. Tillerson of ExxonMobil has conceded that repealing taxpayer-funded subsidies for the big 5 will not increase prices. Prices are set, as he says, by global supply and demand. That's not to say that repealing the subsidies will necessarily bring down prices. We're not making that claim. All along, we've been clear that the purpose of this bill is to make a dent in the deficit by repealing tax breaks for the 5 companies that are the least in need of help from Uncle Sam. Companies that are the least in need of help from Uncle Sam. That's not lowering the cost and ridding our country of its dependence on foreign oil. Requires a long-term comprehensive approach. And in the months ahead, I expect the Democratic caucus will unveil a thorough and forward-thinking plan to do just that. In the meantime, if Republicans in the House are serious about deficit reduction, the Menendez bill is their chance to show it now. There's no good reason not to support this sensible legislation. Speaker Boehner said earlier this week he wants to make trillions of dollars in cuts. Well, here's a good place to start. Indeed, the Speaker himself has said as much. Let's not forget that he was in favor of repealing oil subsidies before he was against it. The bottom line is this. At a time of sky-high oil prices, it's unfathomable to continue to pad the profits of oil companies with taxpayer-funded subsidies. The time to repeal these giveaways is now. Our plan to cut the deficit begins with ending wasteful subsidies to big oil. The Republican plan begins with ending Medicare as we know it. That's a bright line difference between our side and theirs. We know what choice the American people will make. I yield the floor. And ask that the President report the nomination. I don't yield the floor. I simply ask that the President report the nomination.
The morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the following nomination, which the clerk will report.
Nomination: Michael Francis Urbanski of Virginia to be United States District Judge.
Under the previous order, there will be an hour of debate with respect to the nomination, with the time equally divided in the usual form. The Senator from Virginia.
Mr. President, thank you for recognizing me. I'm very gratified yesterday when the Senate unanimously voted to confirm Miranda Wright Allen as a United States District Judge for the Eastern District of Virginia, and I'm very glad to be here today to speak in support of Virginia's nominee to the Western District of Virginia, Judge Michael Urbanski. I would like, as I did yesterday, to express my appreciation to the leadership here in the Senate of both parties for scheduling these important confirmation votes. Filling existing vacancies on our courts is important to Virginia, it's important to America, and particularly in these cases where the nominees are non-controversial to either party and thus are able to be brought forward here for reasonably quick confirmations. One of the bedrock principles in this country is access to justice, and it can clearly be said that vacancies on our courts create backlogs, bottlenecks, and delays, and justice delayed is obviously justice denied. So again, I would like to express my appreciation to the leadership for moving these two very highly qualified nominees, Miranda Wright Allen, who was confirmed yesterday, and Judge Michael Urbanski, who will shortly be voted on. I'm proud of the work that we've been able to do from my office during my time here in the Senate in finding dedicated, well-qualified jurists from Virginia to recommend to the President when vacancies do occur on the Virginia federal bench. When I first arrived in the Senate, Senator John Warner and I developed a robust, collaborative selection process to review candidates. And Senator Mark Warner and I have continued this thorough, deliberative process, and we were pleased to recommend Judge Michael Urbanski to President Obama in June of last year. President Obama first nominated Judge Urbanski for a seat on the United States District Court for the Western District of Virginia last December. He renominated Judge Urbanski earlier this year, and Judge Urbanski was reported out of the Judiciary Committee without opposition on March 10th of this year. Senator Warner and I jointly reviewed a highly competitive field from the Western District of Virginia. Judge Urbanski stood out to me because of the resounding recommendations from the Bar Associations, which he covers now as a magistrate judge. These recommendations all noted Judge Urbanski's incredible work ethic. He has worked tirelessly as a magistrate judge to ensure the efficient administration of justice in the Western District of Virginia. He has served in this capacity since 2004. He also has an outstanding reputation for fairness and a good judicial temperament. He's contributed to the efficiency of the Western District of Virginia by being an effective mediator, resolving a substantial number of disputes without lengthy litigation. He also recently established a Veterans Court in the Western District. This court strives to utilize the many services available to our veterans in order to try to find alternatives to incarceration from nonviolent offenders and to break the cycle of recidivism. I'm very proud to say that Judge Urbanski is a product of Virginia's public universities. He graduated from the University of Virginia School of Law in 1981 and the nation's oldest university, the College of William and Mary, in 1978. Prior to becoming a federal magistrate judge, Judge Urbanski earned a reputation as one of the top trial lawyers in Western Virginia. He was the head of the law firm Woods Rogers Litigation Section, practiced in Roanoke from 1989 to 2004. I've met personally with Judge Urbanski. I'm convinced he has the correct judicial temperament, intelligence, and dedication to make an excellent district court judge. I also had the pleasure of meeting with his family, many of his friends, law clerks, and colleagues. His dedication to his family and to his community is abundantly apparent. So I am proud that Virginia has such an exemplary individual to put forward as a district judge nominee. The Judiciary Committee clearly shares this view, having voted out Judge Urbanski unanimously, and I urge all of my colleagues to support his confirmation today. And with that, I would ask unanimous consent that the time used in quorum calls during the debate on the Urbanski nomination be charged equally to both sides.
Without objection.
and I would now suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
The U.S. Senate set to deal with another judicial nomination today, a vote coming up today at 2 p.m. Eastern. And following that, we understand that the chair and co-chair of the Ethics Committee in the U.S. Senate, Barbara Boxer and Johnny Isakson, will come out to talk about an update on the investigation into former Senator and Nevada Senator John Ensign, who recently resigned. He was replaced by Dean Heller of Nevada, who was just sworn in this week, and we expect those comments at about 2:30 Eastern. Over in the House today, they continue work on oil drilling legislation, and you can follow that now. They're in a series of votes in the House. Follow that on C-SPAN. President Obama today indicated that he will ask Congress to allow FBI Director Robert Mueller to stay on his job an extra 2 years. The FBI, the AP rather, the Associated Press says this is a rare exemption that would give the government stability in a time of change atop the national security team and renewed worldwide attention. In a statement, the President asked the lawmakers to go along with the idea, saying, quote, for the sake of our nation's safety and security. So the President requesting Mr. Mueller, Director Mueller, be extended for 2 more years. Senate continues in a quorum calm. They'll have their judicial nomination vote coming up at 2 o'clock. We should hear more about the ethics investigation into John Ensign sometime after that, about 2:30 or so. Also on Capitol Hill today, the Senate Finance Committee held a hearing with 5 of the top oil company executives testifying, this ahead of legislation that's coming up in the Senate that would cut $21 billion in tax breaks or subsidies for the 5 largest U.S. oil companies. The executives testified today for nearly 3 hours, and we talked to a Capitol Hill reporter who was covering that hearing. Stephen Power of the Wall Street Journal. Why did the Senate Finance Committee ask oil company CEOs to testify today?
They asked them to testify because the Democratic leaders in the Senate are floating legislation to reduce the tax credits that the oil companies are eligible for, and in some cases eliminate them for the stated purpose either in some cases of deficit reduction and in the case of other lawmakers to finance alternative energy. And so they wanted to solicit the testimony of the CEOs on those proposals.
What does the total dollar amount on those subsidies, and how does this hearing set up the debate in the Senate next week on that legislation?
Well, there are different proposals that are out there. President Obama often uses the figure of about $4 billion a year in subsidies. The plan that's been floated by Senator Max Baucus, he has not introduced the actual legislation yet, but he's released the outlines of the plan. That would eliminate somewhere in the area of $2 billion a year, so significantly less than the president's proposal. Among other things, it would eliminate the oil industry's eligibility for a manufacturing tax deduction that many other industries are eligible for. And I think that this hearing is, sort of a pretty good preview of what we're likely to see next week, in the sense that it's a very divided panel with Democrats largely on one side favoring these proposals and Republicans opposing them.
Well, both from Democrats and Republicans, you've heard in this hearing and elsewhere on Capitol Hill that the U.S. doesn't have an energy policy. Why don't we have an energy policy as a nation?
Well, for one thing, in the United States, energy policy is either consciously or unconsciously, the decision has been made to spread authority over energy policy across many different agencies, many different levels of government. You've got local utility boards at the state level and local level that regulate electricity prices. You've got the Environmental Protection Agency, which regulates pollutants, which ultimately can lead to higher energy prices depending on what policies they choose. You've got the Energy Department, which is in charge of nuclear waste policy, and you've got the Interior Department, which is in charge of offshore drilling. So I think that one of the reasons why it is difficult to have, to say that there is a single national energy policy is just that as a nation, we've made the decision that we want to spread decision-making authority around.
In addition to the Senate subsidy legislation, the House has been working through 3 different bills that are designed to open up drilling off the coast of the U.S. Do those have any likelihood of passing in the Senate or becoming part of overall U.S. law?
They face a much more uphill battle to become enacted in the Senate. For one reason, obviously, that the Senate is controlled by the Democratic Party and is supportive of President Obama's administration, and President Obama's administration is taking a more cautious approach to this issue than the Republicans' approach, in the sense that the administration has expressed concern that before approving permits, they want to make sure that the oil companies have adequate containment strategies to handle a much larger spill than previously they were required to plan for. That's a response to the BP oil spill. So the administration has been moving at a much slower pace to approve permits than Republicans think is advisable. And so you've got that basic tension there. And so I don't think that the House proposal has a great chance of being enacted. But as we have seen in the past, the price of oil has a huge impact on policy in Washington. And it was just a couple of years ago that congressional Democrats allowed a 2-decade-old ban on offshore drilling to expire. That was at a time of high oil prices. So you never know.
Stephen Power writes for the Wall Street Journal. The headline on his article today: Oil CEOs on the hot seat. An update on today's Senate Finance Committee hearing. You can read his work online at WSJOnline.com. Thank you for joining us.
Glad to be with you.
Senator from Iowa.
I ask that the calling of the quorum be suspended.
Without objection.